At this time, I'd just like to wish all my connections, all my subscribers, all my followers a wonderful, happy, pleasant holiday period and Christmas period, depending on your religious perspective. This has been a challenging 5 years, as it is 5 years beyond the start of the COVID pandemic. And as we look forward, we have to ask, how could we do better if something like this were to happen again? The truth is that we first have to acknowledge that many of the questions with regards to where the pandemic originated from still haven't been adequately answered. And that's probably one of the most important things as we come into another year that we should reflect carefully on individually and collectively, that maybe we could do better at asking harder questions. There have been a lot of things that have happened during this period of time, for which some people have agreed with, others have been significantly affected by. But most importantly, the pandemic has caused real division in families, among friends. And this is probably a time for healing, a time to try and put aside differences, a time to realize that actually, for most of the public, we are all on the same side. We must never allow anyone, for whatever reason, to cause confusion, to bring separation and infighting when we are all in this together. One of the saddest parts over this pandemic period has been the fact that on both sides, there isn't enough compassion. There isn't an acknowledgement of choice. And oftentimes, if there has been harm, there hasn't been enough empathy from either side. And this is something that we can all do better at when it comes to our period of time in Christmas. Let us remember that at the end of the day, when we look back in another 15 to 20 years, it will become clear that the failures were not really about people. The failures were with regards to science and allowing politics to influence science. The failures were around the fact that information that should have been shared wasn't shared, or that concepts were overhyped. Those things have nothing to do with the general public in terms of their actions because they trust. This is where we have to do better in the future. We have to find a way to bring back that trust. Find a way that we can realize that everyone is on the same team. We all want the best for each other, especially our loved ones and our families. Let us make sure that we do everything in our power to not let the people who did this kind of division remain in a position to try and do it again. That's where we have a choice. That's where we have a responsibility, not just for ourselves, but for future generations, to make a world that is better, a world that is not afraid of questions, a world that tries to answer the science, a world that is not in any way trying to force or to tell you what you must do. There are many lessons that have come out of the last 5 years, and in a sense, it feels as though we're coming to a turning point. But as I have seen on many occasions, every time I thought that we had hit that turning point, it turns out we hadn't reached it yet. So we have to be realistic that there is still some way to go. For those of us who are fighting for an alternative appreciation of what happens, it has been a very, very long road. It's been very challenging and it comes with real costs. For me, at this Christmas period, even though sometimes I do feel tired and there is an ongoing pressure to continue to research and to try and find solutions, I do believe that without that work, that's not in the interest of the public. And for those who don't quite understand what I've been doing, and perceive my challenge as being critical of health and science. It's not really. In truth, I am supporting health and science by actually calling us to be better, calling us to make bigger steps, to not accept what we have seen, where after 5 years there are so many unanswered questions. This is kind of the thing that happened with regards to what's going on with long COVID. Many patients are still suffering, but it's because we hadn't done the 30 years of research to analyze fibromyalgia, ME/CFS, post viral syndrome, Lyme disease, and so we're playing catch up. That should never be allowed to happen again. We always must be striving to understand full pathophysiology of disease. I think that's the most important lesson that I've taken out of the past 5 years. Sadly, science has become lazy in the sense that there is only an interest in finding patch solutions, symptom management, but not actually addressing root cause and understanding of disease. I think that that's probably the biggest challenge ahead of us. As many of us recognize that there are a lot of sick people around, they may not have died, but they're not the same. We have to try and think carefully about what that means for their futures, especially when these are friends and loved ones. How do they cope? How do they manage? What can we do? That's now probably the biggest challenge ahead. And that's what takes up my thought going forward into the new year. As my someone close to me had told me, they understand a lot now about what I have been saying. But people don't want to be berated about what they didn't know. They want to find solutions now that will help them in the future. And that's really where the challenge is. So as you go into this holiday period, make it a commitment that everyone will do everything in their power to ensure that we find solutions, we find protections, we find ways of dealing with the science and the health issues. Let us make a better path forward for the new year, for 2025. And let us make sure that we remember that those people who may have had different opinions from ourselves are still families and they're still friends. Let's remember them and share that love this Christmas. Have a wonderful holiday.